Hello, I'm Derek Walker. I'm the pastor of the Oxford Bible Church, and we're in a series called Creation, Evolution, Revolution. And today we're going to talk about what difference does it make? What difference? Creation, evolution. What difference does it make? You know, in our society nowadays, so much on the media, in the schools, everywhere, we're bombarded, aren't we, with a message that evolution is science, it's fact, and we're not even really allowed to question it. Anyone who questions it is ridiculed. And I want to look at these issues in this series so that we're not intimidated by all these voices, because we understand what's going on. Ultimately, of course, there's only two possibilities for the origin of life and the universe. That is creation by an intelligent designer, by a supernatural God, or evolution, where either our lives have meaning because we're planned and created by God, or we're the product of natural, random, aimless processes that ultimately mean our life is meaningless. And so whether we believe creation or evolution actually affects the whole way we think about ourselves and our life. If there's no creator, then evolution must be true. But if we can show that evolution is false, then that follows from that there must be a creator God who made us. And that's why society that's rejected God continues to believe in evolution, despite the evidence that is mounting up against it. You know, the issue goes to the heart of who we are, how we live our lives, how we think about ourselves, what we believe about everything. So it is so important. The first area I want to look at is the area of purpose and meaning. You know, if believing that we're created gives our life meaning, purpose, significance, we're not an accident. We're part of the plan of God. We must be important to him, otherwise he wouldn't have made us. He made us for a purpose. He made us in his image as the summit of his creation. And that gives us great dignity and value because God values us. We were in his heart from eternity, the Bible says, and he loved us. And he loved us so much that he planned a destiny of glory for us as his sons. And to make that possible, God himself became a man and lived among us and died for us to restore us to God and to make God's dream for us come true. That's how much he loves us. That's how important and how meaningful our lives are. But on the other hand, if we just think we're a byproduct of aimless, random processes of evolution, we're just an accident of nature, we've got no ultimate meaning or destiny. Nobody has planned us or loved us. We've got no ultimate purpose. When we die, that's it. And soon our life, our work will all be forgotten. And that's a rather bleak picture, isn't it? But it is the logical consequence of an evolutionary scenario. And even the leading evolutionists say that. Let me give you some of their quotes. Bertrand Russell said, "We're just a curious accident in a backwater." Peter Atkins of Oxford University said, "We're just a bit of slime on the planet." Stephen Jay Gould from Harvard said, "We're a fortuitous cosmic afterthought, a tiny little twig on the enormously arborescent bush of life." Richard Dawkins from Oxford University says, "We live in a universe which has no design, no purpose, no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." No wonder there's so much depression and suicide in our well-off society. Just imagine this conversation at a school. "Jane, you look down after your biology lesson." "Well, I just learnt I'm nothing special. I just came out of the primordial slime. I'm just an accident and I evolved from monkeys." "Okay, Jane, well, what's your next class?" Self-esteem. Well, the second difference it makes is in our morality. You see, belief in creation gives us a foundation for absolute morality based on the law of God. And that means a society then that is based on the rule of law, respecting the rights and dignity and freedom of all people because they're made in the image of God. But evolution, on the other hand, creates a moral vacuum because now there's no absolute values at all set by God. Everything's relative. That's where relative morality comes from. Because we're all our own gods, we can do what's right in our own eyes. We must find the truth within ourselves. And so we can do whatever feels right for us. No one can impose their morality on us. And so we're free to judge for ourselves. And so there's no basis for morality. Everyone makes up their own rules. And that leads to a spirit of rebellion and lawlessness in a society, as everyone feels free to do whatever they feel like doing. And that's the root of our problems in society. You know, there was a multiple murderer called Jeffrey Dahmer who expressed this very well. He said, if a person does not think there's a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify our behavior to keep it in acceptable ranges? That's what I thought anyway. I always believed the theory of evolution as truth, he said, that we all just came from the slime. When we died, you know, that's it. There's nothing. So actually, there is one ethic that is an absolute in the theory of evolution, and that's the survival of the fittest, where the strong dominate and kill the weak. And so in that theory, you see, instead of all men being equal in the sight of God, evolution says the weak are inferior, and the highest good, really, if we follow it logically, is to weed out the weak out of the population. That's what evolution would imply, so that their genes are removed and that the superior men can be produced in the future. And that's what justified Hitler's program of eugenics and mass murder, killing off the Jews, the gypsies, and the old, everyone he thought was inferior. But that's what consistently the theory of evolution says. It's the survival of the fittest. And that's the most important thing. Because we owe everything to evolution, apparently. So we should honor that central premise, that the strong must dominate and push the weak out the way for the ultimate good of things. We teach our youth that rather than being created in the image of God, they're descended from beasts. And then we're surprised when they act like that. We teach them we owe our very existence to evolution based on the survival of the fittest, and where the strong dominate the weak. And then we're upset with them for bullying and putting this teaching into practice, being thugs, when they're just being consistent with what they're being taught in school. You see, if we're created, God sets the rules and gives us purpose. And if it's God that gives us life, then we owe everything to him. We don't have a right to, for instance, do abortion, because that life doesn't belong to us, it belongs to God. But with evolution, there is no absolute morality or value of life, and so we're free to do whatever is helpful to us. The third area that really makes a big difference is the area of our ultimate beliefs, or there is a spiritual warfare being waged between creation and evolution. So much depends on it. We need to understand what I call the ultimate issue that is at stake here, and it is the center of the spiritual warfare over every person's life. This philosophy of evolution is directly against creation, and it's one of Satan's main deceptions to turn people away from God himself. A leading evolutionist called Sir Julian Huxley said this: in the evolutionary pattern of thought, there is no longer need or room for the supernatural, for God. The earth was not created, he says. It evolved. So did all the plants and animals that inhabited it, including our human selves, mind and soul, brain and body, and also religion evolved. And so he points this out, you see, that whereas belief in creation brings people towards God and towards salvation, belief in evolution actually leads to man thinking God is unnecessary, to reject God as either non-existent or irrelevant anyway. And so creation and evolution are two competing philosophies of life. And the Bible calls these two the truth and the lie. You know, there are many truths, there are many lies, but the Bible talks about the original central truth and the original foundational lie. And ultimately, each person must choose which philosophy they're going to believe and live by. Romans 1 18 to 25, talks about the truth and the lie, and how man knows the truth of creation, but exchanges it for the lie in order to allow him to pursue his own sinful agenda. Let's read those verses, shall we? For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all the ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, see, the truth is about God being our creator. That since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because, although they knew God, they didn't glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Therefore God gave them up to the uncleanness in the lusts of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves. Verse 25, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who's blessed forever. Amen. So the truth of God is that there is a God who made us and to whom we owe our lives. And he decides what's right and wrong, and he will judge us. The lie is a denial of that there is a God who made us. And therefore we are our own gods. We're all part of an evolving universe. We're all evolving into godhood. And there is no God who made us. We're just the product of this natural process of evolution. And therefore we're free to do whatever we want. Those are the true ultimate issues of life. Which one are you going to believe and live by? The Bible says that sinful men exchanged the truth of God for the lie of Satan. And so because they didn't want the truth to be true, they rejected it and they chose to believe the lie because they thought it would give them freedom to do what they want. They thought they could get rid of God in their lives. And that's a process that has been happening. The truth, you see, is the foundational truth that God's kingdom is built on, that God has created us and that we owe everything to him. The lie says, no, that's not true. You can do whatever you like. You can be your own God. You can fulfill yourself because there is no God to be accountable to. We're all just the products of evolution. And that was the original lie that Satan used to pull man and woman away from God in the garden. Genesis 3:5. It says, Satan said this, God knows that in the day you eat of that fruit, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. You will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. I want you to notice what Satan was trying to pull here. You see, God had put the truth into man's heart that he was a created being, entirely unlike God, who is the creator and who is the independent one, the eternal one. So man was made to be dependent on God and under his authority. And the creator must be his Lord, you see. But now Satan comes and he questions the basic truth, that foundational truth, feeding man the lie. What is the lie? The only other alternative explanation for man's existence. Satan claimed that the powerful being that they knew as Elohim was keeping them in the dark, in order to keep them under his thumb. They were telling him, Elohim was telling them, yes, that they were just creatures that depended on him, that he was their creator. But Satan said, actually, if you listen to me instead, your eyes will be open to another reality, that they were actually just like Elohim himself. Elohim was essentially no different to them. They were not created beings. They were actually evolved beings. They were independent. They could have the knowledge of good and evil in themselves. They didn't have to depend on Elohim. In other words, they were saying, cast off Elohim's authority. Deny the truth that he's your creator and that you owe him everything. and realize you're just a God yourself, evolving. And man was deceived by that lie because it was attractive to him that they could be free to be their own gods. And of course they found out that it was a terrible lie because they just came into the bondage of sin and Satan. And so the truth is that man is a created being. The lie is a rejection of that truth to say, no, we're all the product of evolutionary forces. In other words, the truth is creation. The lie is evolution. Well, Satan ever since has been trying to indoctrinate man into evolution. And in more recent times, he's been more successful. Well, the language that Satan used, we can be like Elohim. We can be as God. Only makes sense if he was actually rejecting the idea that God was the creator. Elohim was the creator, the unique creator. He's saying we can all be like Elohim. This only makes sense if Satan actually was believing and propagating evolution, that we're all the result of natural evolution, you see. Because Satan is not stupid. And we see that this is confirmed. You know, when I say he's not stupid, I mean that if he actually was knowing and believing that God Elohim was the infinite God, there was no way that Satan could think he could challenge God and succeed. That would be stupid. That would be insane. But if he deluded himself into believing that actually Elohim was not the creator, but an evolved being, then he deluded himself. I can challenge him because I'm just like Elohim. The proof of this is in Isaiah 14, which tells us about his original sin of pride. Isaiah 14:12, God says, "How you're fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, how you're cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations. For you said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds." And here's the final I will. I will be like the Most High. I will be like Elohim. Now, if he believed that God was the supreme, eternal, infinite creator, that would be sheer madness. But what happened in his heart was this. He, for a time, worshipped God with all the other angels. And he was one of the most glorious of the angels. But it came into his heart. He didn't want the truth to be true. He didn't love the truth that God created him and all his glory should go to God. He didn't want that to be true. And so he started accepting the only alternative explanation, that Elohim had lied to him. And that actually he and Elohim were all products of evolution. And because he didn't love the truth, the lie became attractive, and he embraced the lie, that lie of pride, that he could be his own God, and he could receive worship from lesser beings, and he could accelerate perhaps in his evolution once he's thrown Elohim's shackles off. And so he deluded himself, and in pride he rose up in rebellion against God. But the foundation for his rebellion was that he believed the lie because he didn't love the truth. And the foundation for the kingdom of Satan is that very same lie, that we can be our own gods. And that's the lie he's trying to sell the human race even now. And the issue in your life is, will you believe the truth? That God is your creator, that you owe him everything. You owe him your worship and your glory. Or will you believe the lie, that you are your own God, you can do whatever you like? And then you'll be following Satan into damnation if you do that. And so this is the ultimate issue that Satan got involved with. He deluded himself into thinking he could make himself equal to God. And of course he found out very quickly, and he was thrown out of heaven like lightning to the ground. But he then tried to get mankind to follow him in that same lie by persuading them they could be their own gods, that they were just evolved beings. And he did for a time deceive them in the Garden of Eden and led them astray. Well, this process of believing the lie unto destruction is in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Let's go there. Verse 10. It describes many people here. And it talks about this deception leading to destruction. It's so important you believe the truth and reject the lie. 2 Thessalonians 2:10 describes many people who will perish, it says, who because they did not receive the love of the truth. What truth? That we're created by God. They had that truth in their heart, but they didn't love it. They didn't want it to be true, so they suppressed it, and they received the lie instead. It says they didn't receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. You see, I'll explain in a minute that to be saved, you have to first of all believe the truth that God is your creator. That's the first step towards salvation. So it says they did not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. Therefore, they perish. Then it says, and for this reason God will send them a strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, that they might all be condemned, who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Let's unpack these verses. It says that the process starts by man knowing the truth in himself of creation, but he didn't receive the love of the truth, but instead he had the pleasure in unrighteousness, because he wanted to be his own God, to do as he pleases. And so he didn't love that truth. And that caused him to reject this unwanted truth and instead embrace the lie, which is the only alternative explanation for his existence, which is that he evolved. And he may claim, you see, that it's the evidence, the scientific evidence that led him to that decision. But the Bible actually says it's because in his heart he didn't want the truth to be true. He didn't want God to be over his life. And so he believed the lie because it fitted with his emotions on that. Once this becomes a settled decision in somebody's life, God respects his choice, and it says God gives them over to this delusion, and it will ultimately lead to their eternal destruction. This passage, you see, reveals the downhill process when a man chooses to believe the lie instead of the truth. It says that he goes to destruction. Now, believing the truth of creation actually leads you to being saved. But believing the lie instead inevitably will result in eternal destruction. Why is that? Is it because God wants men to be lost? No. It's because if you believe the lie of evolution, you believe that basically man is basically good and doesn't need saving. You see, if there isn't a God who will judge you by his perfect standards, then there's no such thing as sin. There's no such thing as judgment. And there's no need for salvation. So somebody who believes that lie won't even be interested or feel the need to be saved. So it's impossible for him to be saved. He's got to, first of all, believe the truth that there is a God who created him. Yes, who loves him, but that he has sinned against God. And he is under the law and the judgment of God. And therefore he needs salvation. And once a man believes in creation, that should then lead him towards wanting to get right with that God that created him. And then he hears the good news of Jesus Christ, and then he can be saved. And so it's essential that you believe the truth, even for your salvation. Your eternal destiny depends on you believing the truth rather than the lie. That's the spiritual warfare over your life. The truth starts with God, and God's kingdom is based on the truth that God is your creator and Lord, and you owe your worship to him. But the lie originated with Satan, and his whole kingdom is built on that lie of evolution, that we all just are the products of evolution. Which do you love? Do you love the truth, or do you love the lie? That's the ultimate question. Now, what I've been saying does apply strictly to atheistic evolution, which denies there is no God at all. Of course, there is theistic evolution that believes that God created the world, but then he used evolution to develop life in all its forms. What should we say against that? Well, first of all, I have to ask this question. Would God use an evolutionary method of creating life that is so consistent with Satan's lie that it seems to confirm Satan's lie? Because the fact is, people who believe in evolution, they tend to, as a whole, the effect of evolution, because it looks like this lie of Satan that we were just here as a result of evolution, we don't need God. God's unnecessary now. And so the effect of evolution on our society has been to turn society away from God. Would God use such a method that seems to play into Satan's hands in that way? I have great doubt. I believe that evolution has undermined man's faith in the Bible more than any other one thing. I believe it's spiritually toxic, and Christians shouldn't touch it, you see, because I don't believe God would have used this faith-destroying method to support Satan's lie in people's minds. I also reject this idea of theistic evolution because if God did use theistic evolution, why didn't he say so in his Bible? Why in his account in Genesis does he not even mention theistic evolution? And later in this series I'll show you that actually the Genesis account does contradict theistic evolution. Why would God give us such a false impression? And finally, why would God use such a ghastly, terrible method of cruelty and suffering and death? That isn't glorifying to God. What is God is glorious. He created it. He said it, and it was done. This is the God of the Bible. This is the glorious God, the God of creation.